Good evening. In this broadcast, the news from the television company Ostankino. For the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, today was an ordinary working day. He did not celebrate the 77th anniversary of the October Revolution. At his own post in the government building, the Prime Minister, Viktor Chernomyrdin, also spent the day. He worked on documents, conducted a meeting with high-placed officials from the Ministries of Finances and Economics on the draft budget for '95 in connection with its approaching discussion in the State Duma. Today in Moscow, the decision of the Security Council was announced regarding the dramatic destabilization of the financial market. The Russian Security Council feels that contributing directly to the landslide plunge of the rate of the ruble on the 11th of October were the lack of coordination, untimeliness, and even incompetence in the decisions and actions of several federal bodies of executive power, the lack of professionalism and irresponsibility of certain official figures. In the Security Council's decision, it's noted that the collapse of the rate of the ruble was an urgent occurrence, presenting a threat to the national security of Russia. Accusations of unprofessional and irresponsible behavior are made against the resigned Vice Premier Alexander Shokhin, the former chairman of the Central Bank, Viktor Gerashchenko, his deputy, Dmitry Tulin, the director of the Department of International Operations, Alexander Potemkin, who recently was dismissed from his post, and the acting finance minister, Sergei Dubinin, the deputy minister, Andrei Vavilov, and also the head of the Currency and Export Control Service, Viktor Kurunyi. In the resolution, banks were also named who profited most from the collapse of the ruble. They are Moscow Bank, the Oilchem Bank, Alpha Bank, International Moscow Bank, and Meshcombank. Meanwhile, Mosbank has categorically refuted even partial responsibility for the plunge in the rate of the ruble Black Tuesday. This was told to Business Desk today by the Vice Premier of Moscow Bank, Sergei Zverev. Entrepreneurial activity on the securities market of Russia henceforth will be conducted by exclusively professional participants on the basis of licenses issued in the manner stipulated by legislation. A relevant decree was signed by the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin. This was announced by the press service of the head of state. In the aims of curbing abuses and violating citizens' rights, the decree establishing that emissions of securities will be conducted exclusively on the basis of registration with authorized state organs, unless otherwise stipulated by the legislation. Boris Yeltsin instructed the government, in coordination with the central bank, by the end of the year, to undertake measures to terminate entrepreneurial activities on the securities market and the financial market, which are conducted without required licenses. The decree establishes a Federal Securities Commission and the funds market under the government of the Russian Federation. The Federal Commission will be headed by the first Vice Premier, Anatoly Chubais. Although the leadership of the country today was occupied with their daily tasks, yet the anniversary of the October Revolution in Russia remains a holiday and a non-working day. And today in Moscow, as always, participants of the historical parades gathered to mark the 7th of November 1941. It was early in the morning, the same as it was 53 years ago, when during this time on Red Square, as always on the 7th of November, a parade was held. Directly to the front, which was literally 30 to 40 kilometers away, tanks proceeded and people advanced. They went to storm the 2 million-strong group of Germans near Moscow. Those who had defended Moscow gathered today at the tomb of the unknown soldier. For all of us who is still alive today, that day in 1941 is precious, when we, in the snow, because snow was falling and it was cold. From here, we directly moved to the front. We had to defend Moscow. We defended it. And I even reached Berlin. There were so many of them on that memorable day, and this is how many remain today. And each year, they are fewer and fewer. Today, in the Veterans Parade, only 30 people participated. Authorities of Moscow intend to erect a housing complex of approximately 200,000 square meters of living area for veterans and invalids of the Great Patriotic War. As Interfax tells us, it's planned to build the structure along the railway line near the Domitinskaya Street, which is adjacent to the Victory Park on Poklonnaya Hill. The left opposition today conducted rallies and demonstrations throughout the country dedicated to the 77th anniversary of the October Revolution. Almost 20 communist parties and organizations of Russia gathered their supporters on the October Square in Moscow, from where the march to Lubyanka began. In our country, there's probably no celebration full of more contradiction than the 7th of November. For some, as before, it remains a point of accounting, the beginning of the path to a brighter future. For others, the greatest tragedy of the 20th century, which set Russia back by decades. With what do you associate the 7th of November? With good demonstrations, balloons, flags, beautiful celebrations. It's a shame that we don't have them. With the great celebration of the October Revolution, because we went through all of this. There are very few today who can still value the significance of the Great October. Russian communists consider that today is their political triumph because for the October rally they managed to gather a larger crowd than in the last 3 years. The most extremist-oriented Saja Mulatova exhorted those present towards civil insubordination and to hold a political strike, and the respectable communist leader Gennady Zyuganov feels that the most important thing is to adopt a law in the Duma about early elections of the parliament and president and to hold them. Incidentally, October in Moscow celebrated in different ways. For example, Pushkin Square, where the antithetical spectrum of Russian political scene was represented. What does the 7th of November mean for you? I think it's a day of mourning, not just for me, but for the entire country. The 7th of November is the day of the communist coup and the day of the February Revolution, the day the February Revolution perished, which was the truly democratic revolution. After the collapse of the USSR, this is not a holiday, but the devil only knows what. If it's not declared a day of national tragedy, it should be abolished as a holiday. No matter what, but the majority of Russians today are simply resting and are attempting not to remember politics. Under a rainbow of crimson banners on this November morning, the adherents to the Lenin ideas gathered, and later, to the sound of the International and the drumbeat, they marched along Nevsky Prospect. For more than 1.5 hours, the autumn marathon through city streets continued, because in the afternoon, the Palace Square was drenched in the color crimson. Here, the rally commenced of the representatives of the social political movement, Labor Leningrad, the Russian Communist Working Party, and other organizations. The speakers there called for a return to the bright future and the inviolable union of the Soviet republics. Nostalgia for marches, demonstrations, celebrations of the revolution brought many people to Palace Square. But one cannot enter the same water twice, and yet some have a driving desire to take power again. But from year to year, fewer and fewer people participate in performances staged by the leaders of the Communist Party on Palace Square. Another anniversary of the Socialist Revolution on the shores of the Pacific Ocean was marked, this time modestly. Along the main street of Vladivostok, which recently bore the name Lenin, a column of demonstrators marched along. On Central Square, they participated in a rally organized by the Union of Primoryan Communists. Later, to the monument of the leaders of the revolution, flowers were laid. Bound up in daily problems, and in Vladivostok, regularly electricity is disconnected in homes, and after the flood of Black Tuesday, prices for food have risen by 1/3. The masses are silent, for people evidently are indifferent toward the ideas of both the communists and the Democrats. This again was proven by the recent elections of the Rim and City Dumas, which were not held because of the non-attendance of voters. Just now, our correspondent returned from the on-duty department of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, where throughout the day information was accumulated on how in the country manifestations were held dedicated to the 7th of November. In the regions of the Russian Federation, in more than 100 cities, meetings, marches and demonstrations were held and conducted. In St. Petersburg, we have information that 30,000 people gathered. In Moscow, on Lubyanskaya Square, this was 20,000 people. As well, in Chelyabinsk, in Kemerovo, in Kirov, in Novokuznetsk and Meshtorechinsk, their rallies were held, and everything was conducted in a normal framework under the control of law enforcement organs. Almost no violations were recorded. If in Russia the 7th of November passed by calmly, in the capital of Ukraine, the anniversary of the October Revolution was marked by clashes of demonstrators with police. As a result, 6 people were injured, basically law enforcement officials. The columns of demonstrators, headed by the national deputies carrying state flags, is storming Krishatik. Militia is complying with orders and manages to deflect this advance. This clash evidently could have been avoided if the city authorities of Kiev were more consistent in their decisions and were able to predict the situation. In advance, it was known that the communists for the 7th of November were preparing their rally and a holiday demonstration along Krishatik exactly at midday, and the National Democrats from 10 o'clock in the morning had planned to hold a mournful march in the same place in memory of the victims of communism. But 2 days ago, the leadership of the city council, unexpectedly for the organizers, resolved to postpone the protest action of the Democrats until the afternoon in order that they would march along Krishatik after the communist demonstration. But it was already too late, and by 10 o'clock in the morning near the walls of the St. Sophia Cathedral, crowds gathered surrendered, and despite militias and treaties, everyone moved toward Krishchatyk, where they were met by the tight ranks of the special OMON forces. Nothing helped, neither icons, crosses, nor even deputy mandates. The conflict was resolved only after talks were held between the head of the Ruch, Chernovol, and the leader of the communists, Simonenko. The first to march along Krishchatyk in each direction were the supporters of communism and socialism, and when the red banners faded in the distance, the lanes were open for demonstrations under blue and yellow flags. The President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, sent a telegram with condolences to the family of the deputy of the State Duma who tragically died, Valentin Margilyan. The deputy died the 5th of November in hospital from skull brain trauma inflicted on him by unidentified persons on the evening the 1st of November in the driveway of his own home. Condolences also were expressed by the chairman of the State Duma, Ivan Rybkin. And one more tragic death. Yesterday, again, anonymous individuals killed the head of the Provolga railway line, one of the colleagues of the Ministry of Transportation and Communications of Russia, Yuri Tsitil. The Prime Minister Viktor Chernomyrdin expressed condolences to his family, relatives, and friends. The leaders of the country assured that law enforcement organs will do everything possible to find and punish the criminals. Today in Tajikistan, preliminary results were tallied in the presidential elections and the referendum on the constitution. The third nationally elected president of Tajikistan is the current head of state, the 42-year-old Emomali Rakhmonov, who, according to the election results, gathered 60% of the votes, and his rival, Abdulmalik Abdullabjanov, gathered 35% of the votes. 5% of the ballots, for various reasons, were recognized as invalid. As had been presumed, Rakhmonov received most support in the Shatlon district, from whence he was chosen to be a presidential candidate, that is 99.6%. The Zhenilvabatsk district, as expected, preferred its own candidate, Abdullabjanov, with 83%. The predictions of the skeptics were not justified that Gorny Badakhshan would ignore the elections altogether, or only individuals would attend the booths. In Pamir, almost the entire population showed up to vote. More than 90% of the mountain people preferred Abdullabjanov. The elections, which were followed by observers from Russia, the CIS countries, Turkey, Iran, and experts of the CESC and the UN, were conducted in an organized fashion without violations of existing legislation. However, in the headquarters of the Central Election Commission of the rival of Emomali Rakhmonov, Abdulmalik Abdullabjanov, today they issued confirmations of extensive falsifications in favor of the chairman of the Supreme Soviet. As Interfax reports in the press release of the headquarters, protocols of the counting commissions were replaced and violent pressure and threats were used on their chairman. Today is the 45th anniversary since the founding of the first sea oil rig, the Oil Rocks. On the 7th of November 1949, 80 kilometers southeast of Baku, for the first time in the world, an oil fountain was derived from a profound depth of the sea. From this day on, construction of the unique oil village began on the Caspian Sea. On water streets and docks, residences sprang up, medical institutions, and even a boulevard in the open sea. The workers of the oil industrial town connect their future with partnership with foreign countries, and especially Russian oil companies. In Azerbaijan, a corresponding project was prepared, which foresees drilling in the area of the Oil Rocks village and boreholes from specific oil sites, which today are being prepared for in Baku. Hundreds of Belarusian churches demolished in the revolutionary October promised to return to the faithful in the form of new churches. Among them is an entire Orthodox complex in Minsk with the main cathedral in honor of the icon of the Mother of God, the Joy of all who sorrow, which was built in the memory of the victims of the Chernobyl disaster. For now, all church feasts during the week are held next door in the military tent. Despite the complications of construction because of financial shortcomings, it has been possible to raise a belfry in church in memory of Saint Efrosinia of Polotskaya, mostly because of donations of the Society for the Blind and Handicapped. The main cathedral has begun to grow with the involvement of the firm Ruchet, which took on all financial concerns. At the recent feast of the icon of the Mother of God, of Joy of all who sorrow, the construction of a cathedral by the same name was blessed by the Metropolitan of Minsk, the Patriarchal See of Belarus, Filaret. This process of creation in the church is like an example of the fact that in society, creative processes should continue despite any difficulties. The top news story of the day in Lithuania was information on how, on the 6th of November, the railway bridge was blown up over the river Bužuolis, which is around 36 kilometers from Vilnius in the Kaunas direction. As a result of the explosion, almost 80 meters of railway tracks has been destroyed, which caused a temporary cessation of traffic. As a result of the explosion, thankfully, there were no casualties, but they could have been. 15 minutes after the bridge was damaged, the train Moscow-Kaliningrad was to travel that route, but because of the vigilance of the employees of the traffic services, the passenger train was stopped on time and no disaster occurred. The Prime Minister of Lithuania, Adolfas Šleževičius, speaking today on national radio, called this act a pre-planned terrorist diversion. Tomorrow, residents of the United States will go to their voting stations. Congressional elections are an indicator of the popularity of President Clinton and his Democratic Party. What is the choice of ordinary voters? Our correspondent reports from Washington. The pre-election campaign in the United States, a celebration or a farce? Candidates' promises, I'll take care of you, attempts to convince, accusations, hopes, cynicism. My house is my castle. The Urtemalen family, Allison, William, and their small daughter, live in the state of Virginia. They plan to vote. Allison is a bookkeeper. William works in a law firm. Those same average Americans. What will change in your lives after these elections? In essence, nothing. And what can change? Clinton will still be president, but if the Republicans are successful, it will be more difficult for him. In the state of Virginia, the basic battle for the post of senator is between the Republican Oliver North and the Democrat Charles Robb. They barely speak about their platforms, only accuse each other. Party differences on taxes, weapons sale, abortion rights, health care reform. They seem truly to have been put on the back burner. In television, ads and speeches, the attempt is to find something compromising in the rivals' past. North lied to Congress during the investigation of the Iran-Contra affair. Robb, at one time, behaved himself too freely with women, although he's married. The Urtemalen family does not like all of this. Politicians are clarifying their personal relations. Seems are far from this House, but elections are elections, and one of them will win on Tuesday. The fate of the elections, the 8th of November, will be decided by such people as Allison and William. But that will be the fate of the elections, not the fate of the country. None of the candidates are deliberating fundamentals such as private property in America, and the majority of Americans, such as Allison and William, are satisfied with their lives. Today, again, for the believing Jews and Arabs, the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron reopened on the west bank of the Jordan River. This site is considered to be one of the holiest for Judaism and Islam as well. The cave had been closed after one of the Jewish settlers, Baruch Goldstein, shot praying Palestinians with an automatic weapon, as a result of which tens of Arabs were killed. In order to avoid a similar tragedy, this time stricter security measures were undertaken. Today, Brussels is blockaded by large transport trailer trucks, the owners of which are protesting the price increase on road tariffs. From the new year, in European Union countries, cargo vehicles will be able to use auto routes only with a so-called Euro vignette, which for Belgian drivers will cost 50,000 francs. And this will place many transportation drivers before the threat of bankruptcy. More than 100 people died as a result of flooding and landslides in northwest areas of Italy. This tragic result is publicized on the headlines of today's Italian newspapers. The number of casualties and those missing can still increase because the rains continue. Thousands of volunteers, including Carabineros and other army units, continue rescue work. The 100th anniversary of the birthday of Sergei Yesenin will be broadly celebrated in Russia next year. It was decided to form an organizational committee to prepare for and conduct functions dedicated to that date. This is stated in a decree signed by the President Boris Yeltsin. The Czech capital has become now the literary capital of the world. Famous poets, prose authors, playwrights from more than 40 countries gathered on Vltava shores for the Congress of the International Pen Club. Literature and political power, freedom of speech and intolerance. These are the main topics of the forum. It was opened by Václav Havel, a writer-philosopher, yesterday's dissident who spent years in prison for his convictions, and today's president of the Republic. An eloquent sign of the times, just as the fact itself that the Congress was held for the first time in a post-communist country. Among participants and guests, there are many famous figures: Arthur Miller, Ginter Grass, Philip Roth, Harold Pinter, and worthily represented here is our Russian literature with Vosnesensky, Baklanov, Makanian, Chukhonzev, Rain, Popov, Yerofeev. Andrei Bitov is the president of the National Pen Center. It is known how difficult it is today to gather writers. Even in the same country, we know that. How do you view such a broad forum which gathered in Prague? It's only because it's difficult to gather them, therefore the desire arises to gather. Human communications are necessary. We live among people, but the fact that we live among writers is surprising for the writers themselves. Since 1992, in Russia, an International Leonardo Prize was instituted. It's awarded by the Leonardo Club, which unites figures of Russian culture, science, business, directors of mass media, and organs of state rule. In 1993, the laureate of the award was the Minister of National Heritage and Culture of the Sultanate Oman, the Prince Faisal bin Ali Al Said, one of the most famous patrons of the arts in the Arab world. And it was presented by Alexander Yakovlev, the president of the Leonardo Club. Laureates of the awards in 1993 were also named the Princess of Wales Diana, the Secretary General of the organization combating poverty, UNCTAD, Kenneth Taosi, and the prominent Japanese culture activist, the president of the Association Sokogatai, Dai Sako Ikeda, and the founder of the International Association of Chess Players from Belgium, Basil Kog. And therefore, it's not coincidental that the presentation ceremony of the Leonardo Awards, awarded to the most prominent patrons and organizers in the area of sports and culture, was the Moscow Metropole Hotel, where former traditions are being reborn in Russian patronage and sponsorship of the arts. Expressing satisfaction and gratitude for the award, the Prince Faisal bin Ali Al Said noted that lately, most actively, ties are beginning to develop between the Sultanate Oman and Russia. And the first official step in that direction will be the planned signing of the Agreement on Cooperation in the Sphere of Culture. And it, as we know, knows no boundaries and brings nations closer. Now, it's even difficult to believe that this enormous panneau of 318 times 5 by 5.5 meters is the subject of curiosity for everyone. The Suvorov storming of the village Goshpental on the 3rd of September 1795 was drawn by Joseph Rosen 100 years ago, and for years was kept in storage. It was rolled up in another canvas. This is how it looked. And no one had seen this painting. And now the St. Petersburg State Memorial Museum of Alexander Suvorov, which owns this painting, will quite soon present it to the viewers. Since the renewal of it in the Restorational Center Antiquaire Joint Share Association is approaching its completion. The outstanding work for restorational projects and specialists can rarely be seen even in our reputable museums. In another workshop of the center, a work of Gabilian, which for 150 years served as a fireplace screen. And the most difficult work, and extremely complicated, is with the ancient Turkmenian carpet, Shah Kerman, the king of carpets, because of the complexity of the quality. Is it easy to precisely restore the design and color if 1 decimeter of this rug consists of 5,500 woolen knots? We must say that this impressive restorational center brings no profit to its founders, and barely enough is there for salaries for the restorationists, for the necessary equipment, the chemicals, materials, and at times for precious materials. But no one murmurs against the fate of the serious capital investments in this project. The main aim is being justified here, a striving to preserve the most valuable, the golden hands of the restorationists, because we must think, what will we leave for those who come after us? The construction of a precise copy, life-size, of the sadly renowned ship Titanic is being conducted by one of the firms of Japan. The new Titanic will be used as a floating hotel and international conference center. The twin of the ghost ship will be a precise copy of its predecessor, except for the engine. The construction of the Titanic, too, will be completed by 1997, and it's not excluded that the ball, which you'll learn of from the next report in the end of the century, will be held on its luxurious decks. Music, flowers, and dance, almost like it was for Natasha Rostova at her first ball, and it occurred far from the Neva Banks in one of the best hotels of Paris, Crillon. Exquisite apparel and decoration for young debutantes at the ball was supplied by its organizers, the leading Parisian fashion houses, Christian Dior, Nina Ricci, Pierre Cardin, and many others, and also the famous jewelry company Chaumet. Rivaling the French maidens of noble blood were Beaumont representatives from Italy, England, Belgium, Spain, and the United States in the outfits of their national designers. For the next ball, it's planned to invite young women from Russia. One by one, they triumphantly filed through the halls of the hotel, overflowing with a multitude of guests of the evening, among whom there were many famous people, princesses, countesses, baronesses. If not the entire Paris monde, then at least a good part of it venerated this rare event, even for Paris of our days. It was an opportunity to show oneself and see others, and combine the pleasant with the beneficial, participate in a benevolent act. Donations of the ball's guests were designated for the Pasteur Institute. What regards the culprits of this celebration, one may assume that they were overwhelmed with emotions, as is expected at this moment. I'm very happy, admitted Stefanida Vinjon from New York. No matter how charming the sounds of the waltzes are, nor the graciously spinning couples, the contemporary, with its manners and tastes here, took its own. Because in the carriage of the past today, at a brilliant ball, one won't go far. With this, I bid you farewell. The program in a moment will be continued with the sports. Goodbye. Good evening. In the sports chronicle of the day today, the leading spot is taken by tennis. In Moscow, the Kremlin Cup has opened, and at this hour, the first results are known. The Russian Andrei Cherkasov unexpectedly lost to the German Henrik Dreckmann 6-2, 4-6, 4-6. Chuck Adams beat Jakub Klasik in 2 sets. Daniel Wacek also in 2 sets beat Thomas Muster. The tournament of the team of the Russian hockey stars through the country continues. The report of our special correspondent, Evgenia Kuznetsov from Yaroslavl. The second match was held of the preliminary tournament of the hockey team, the Stars of Russia. In Yaroslavl, to the joy of the overflowing stands, the local Torpedoes beat the Stars 5-4. In the 4th minute of the match, the hosts opened the score. But in the middle of the first period, in 1 minute, Prokhorov, Mogilny, and Makarov each scored 3 goals altogether. The Torpedoes didn't stay in debt, and before the second break, the score was 5-3 in favor of the hosts. In the last 20 minutes, Kasatonov reduced the gap to a minimum, but to tie the score, the guests were impeded by the goalie of the Torpedoes, Alexei Chervakov. The Stars were not even helped by the disqualification of one of the rival team members, the initiative of which apparently belonged to Pavel Bure. I can't say that it was my initiative, probably more a team initiative. And I think that it happened for 2 reasons. First of all, we were losing, and it's not always pleasant to be losing. Secondly, of course, this was more of a performance. And again about tennis, at the women's tournament in the American city Oakland, in the finals, the Spaniard Arantxa Sanchez in 3 sets beat the most famous Martina Navratilova, the score 1-6, 7-5, 6-3, and in favor of the second seed of the world. Navratilova partially avenged herself in the doubles, where together with Gigi Fernandez, she defeated the duo Sanchez-Davenport. The 45-year-old American George Foreman created a type of miracle, and at his age won the title of the world's strongest heavyweight boxer. His match with the former champion Michael Moore ended for the latter with a knockout in the 10th round. Information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center. A broad, lethargic cyclone with a center over the polar Ural area will tomorrow influence the weather of the north and east of Russia. Cloudy weather with snow will be felt tomorrow in the Arkhangelsk area, where at night the temperatures will be -8 to -13, during the day -3 to 8. In Karelia and the Leningrad district, tomorrow would be partly cloudy skies with -3 to 8 temperatures. You see that the Baltic countries from the west will be receiving a new atmospheric front, which will bring warm, humid air. Therefore, in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, tomorrow drizzling rains with possible fogs. Temperatures during the day +1 to 6 degrees. In the Kaliningrad district, as high as +9 degrees. In the west of Belarus, tomorrow the weather will be the same as in the Baltic countries, cloudy with rain. In the east of Belarus, with clearer skies, at night the temperatures will reduce to -2 to 7 during the day, from 0 to +5. In Moldova and in the west of Ukraine, without precipitation during the day, +3 to 8. The east of Ukraine, the central Chernozem area, and the central regions of Russia will be under the influence of a small anticyclone, which is shifting into this area from the Botnik Gulf. Therefore, here, tomorrow, partly cloudy skies with a precipitation at night, -2 to 7, and in places down as low as -12 during the day, 0 +5. There's still inclement weather in the Caucasus, whereas meteorologists say an atmospheric front has settled in. In the south of the Krasnodar and upper ballroom areas wet snow. Temperatures are around zero. Near Novorossiysk, previously strong easterly winds 25 to 30 meters per second. Temperature of the air in the Black Sea coast of the Caucasus is plus 5 to 10 degrees. In the Transcaucasian republics tomorrow, cloudy, rainy weather during the day, plus 6 to 12 degrees. And now about the weather in Moscow. In Moscow and its suburbs on the 8th of November, mostly clear with precipitation at night, -2 to -4. Throughout the district as low as -7 during the day, from 0 to plus 2 degrees. This is the weather for tomorrow, and I wish you a good disposition, and the Russian Food Bank hopes that its shares will bring you high profits and that your morning will be pleasant. Goodbye.